Testing. Hey, what's up? I'm Jacob Litzel, your Elixir Mentor, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Elixir Mentor Podcast. This is where we discuss everything related to Elixir, from interviews with enthusiasts, pioneers in the community, to innovative projects and libraries shaping Elixir's future. Today, we're joined with Daniel Bergholz, a developer who's made the leap from JavaScript to Elixir, and he founded TechSchool, which is a platform for free tech learning resources. Daniel, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today. Do you want to just give us a little introduction of who you are?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks for having me. It's a huge honor to be here. To be honest, I learned Elixir for the first time on your channel, so it's like a huge honor to be here. So yeah, my name is Daniel. I'm a Brazilian front-end developer. I have been coding since 2016, professionally since 2019, mostly with JavaScript and React frameworks like Next.js, lately a little bit of Remix as well. But then I found Elixir and things changed. So yeah, that's it.
So I'm guessing most of your focus, you like your day job and everything, you're mostly in JavaScript and did you say React?
Yeah.
No, Next.js.
Yeah, lately Remix, but yeah, the frameworks are all over the place. So I'm just going to say React.
Okay. It does seem to change weekly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So
way too much.
What was like your first encounter with Elixir? What caught your attention?
So I actually wrote a very long blog post explaining like my journey from my current situation to Elixir. But a TLDR would be that late next year, I started getting a little bit tired and a little bit burned out on the JavaScript frameworks. Like, I think if I try to recount every single JavaScript framework that I ever used in my life, I think it would be like 5 or 6. And they changed so fast. I was like, you know what? I'm tired. I am tired of having to relearn the same thing over and over and over again. I'm just tired. I want something simpler. So on my free time, I started this journey to find something simpler, maybe easier. And I think it's funny because I follow some other people on Twitter that were going through a similar journey. I know some people that tried Go, some other people that tried Laravel. But for me, before I jumped on Elixir, I was actually trying out Ruby on Rails because like Rails is pretty strong on that slogan of compress the complexity of modern web apps. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what I want. So I gave Ruby on Rails a chance and I didn't like it as much for many reasons, but the main ones are like lack of types. I don't really enjoy the front end framework of Rails, which is Hotwire. I didn't find it very intuitive. And Rails is very, very, very object oriented. And like JavaScript is an OOP language as well. But I don't know if you ever had the chance to work on a React code base, but you don't see classes anywhere. Like if you want to get a PR blocked, just open up a PR with a class. It's going to get blocked. No React developers like classes. And even with the addition of hooks lately, like use state, use effect, use whatever, it's very functional. It's not truly functional because we have side effects, but it's functions. So I was like, okay, I don't like OOP. Let me see the other options available. And I've seen some people online talking about Elixir. And I was like, let me take a quick look. The first thing that I found out was about José Valim, which is Brazilian. And I was like, okay, nice. For those who don't know, I am Brazilian. So I got happy, like on the first interaction that I got with Elixir. And then I started studying Elixir a little bit deeper. And the first thing that I tried looking into the framework was, how is the front end? Like, what's the framework that they use for the front end? How easy it is, how performant it is. Can I build complex UIs with it? And then I saw live view, and I was like, okay, this looks very simple. Writing live view code is similar to React in many ways. Like if you have a form on React, you're gonna have on submit, on change function, and then you're gonna do some things inside that function. And then live view is similar. You can handle an event, and you define whatever the event you want to listen to, and then you handle that event on the server side. So I was like, okay, checkbox. This checkbox is checked for me. The front end looks nice. It looks performant. I was checking some websites online that were using live view, and I thought they were pretty neat. And I was like, okay, front end, check. Now let me see the back end. And one of the things that caught my attention in Elixir and Phoenix is mostly the slogan on the homepage of Phoenix, which is like peace of mind from prototype to production.
Mm-hmm.
And I started investigating a little bit more. And then I learned about like concurrency, parallelism, and that Elixir uses all the CPU cores on your machine. And as a front-end developer, that's the type of thing that I don't want to deal with. Like, I don't like servers. They're complex. I'm a React guy. And when I saw people saying that on Elixir, you can just do vertical scaling, for example, because you are going to use all the CPUs from your machine. And Node.js is single-threaded by default. Right. So if I have like a full stack Next.js or Remix application, I'm using Node on the backend, and I'm using just one thread. So I can horizontally scale, or I need to study a little bit of the Node cluster mode to parallelize the process on the same machine. But it's complex, and I don't want to deal with any complexity on the backend. I wanted the easiest alternative on the backend.
Well, and like from a product owner perspective, just being able to vertically scale simplifies your DevOps tremendously, right?
Yes, so much. So imagine me, a front-end developer, trying to deal with my own servers, and then the Elixir folks are like, yeah, just get a bigger server. That's it. And I was like, that sounds good to me. I don't want to deal with the servers, at least not for now. I want to learn the language, play a little bit, deploy. And if I have scalability issues someday, I can just get a bigger server with more CPU cores, and that's it. There's no extra work on my end. I don't need to use Node cluster, Node child process. No, none of that. Just get a bigger server.
Yeah, I love the benchmark articles that are always written. Like you'll read like the Bleacher Report example where they like cut their servers by like 96% or something when they rewrote their back end. And it's just like I don't think a lot of products ever will see that much traffic, but it's nice to know if you have a small product, you'll probably never have scalability issues as long as you use Elixir.
It goes to the slogan of Phoenix, right? Peace of mind. That's what I wanted. I know that I deployed TechSchool, and I really thought that someday it might explode and people are going to use it a lot. So I thought, okay, if it explodes in popularity, no problem. I'll just get a bigger server. Now, sure, there are benefits of having more servers on different places, but I'm a noob on the backend. So I want the easiest solution possible on the backend. So yeah, like I really enjoyed the front end. It looks pretty easy to use. It's similar to React. Oh, and I didn't even mention the functional paradigm, which is awesome because I just write functions on my React code, and then I have no classes on Elixir. And in my mind, it's easier. I know that some people that are very deep on OOP, they say it's hard to translate their brain to functional. But I don't know. I never understood OOP. And I have a degree in engineering. I never really understood the classes.
When you officially like make that switch, though, the functional paradigm makes so much more sense. It's like how you think and solve problems, right? I was the same way when I first started learning how to program. Object-oriented programming was so hard for me to wrap my head around. I didn't get it, and it took I feel like it took years for me to fully grasp it before I did. And then, you use it. I was like a Swift developer then when I finally started understanding things. And I did a lot of just iOS apps, so front end iOS apps. And then I made the transfer to back end developer APIs like Node.js, Express. Those were my, my daily drivers. I refused to learn front end web development because I just there's too much going on. Like it was too hard for me. It's easier to write performant server code, in my opinion, than performant client code. And I feel like LiveView is really my first experience where I've really dove in and made front end projects. But the learning curve is less, and it's just like easier to grasp and understand. There's less going on.
Yeah, and I think some people say that the learning curve is really high, but I think it's high if you are, as I mentioned, like super deep on OOP. So for example, you get a random Ruby on Rails developer and ask them to use Elixir, they're going to find it strange. But I just never understood it. Like it's so many concepts that you need to learn before you do anything. Like you need to learn classes, inheritance, the constructor, getters and setters. And it's like, and then on Elixir, well, you have functions and you group those functions in a module. That's it. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, really? Is this it? Now, sure, there are more complex topics like macros and other stuff that I still don't know to this day. But the fact that I don't know any of those advanced topics and I was able to ship TechSchool, to me says a lot. Because I don't know anything complex about Elixir, like super deep functional programming. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just know about modules and functions. And that was enough.
I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but I think that's a nice thing with Elixir, right? You can learn the basics. With LiveView, Phoenix, and Elixir, and you don't really have to understand OTP, gen servers, macros, and you can still create your project. And then as you slowly get deeper and deeper and you grasp your understanding of the ecosystem, you'll be like, okay, what is this meta programming stuff? What are gen servers and how can I use them? And I do think that's the shiny object, right? People hear concurrency and gen servers. And I think if you come in fully excited about that from an OOP background without fully understanding the functional paradigm, you might start writing nasty code. Because I think a lot of people will start using gen servers as like maybe more like global state versus, a process that runs on its own and, does its thing and then, returns a message to you or whatever you're using. It could just process a large amount of data, but to understand that process and still kind of use the immutability as your strength. But I feel like I went on a tangent, but I feel like, Elixir lets you slowly step into those complicated things.
Yeah. And here's the thing, like, before I started building TechSchool, I really enjoy learning something new by coding. So my goal was I'm going to start building this thing. And once I hit a wall, I'm going to go back and learn what I need to learn in order to ship TechSchool. So for example, the first thing that I did was create the HTML pages. And that was easy. So I didn't know any Elixir, any Phoenix, and I finished the homepage, for example. And then as I felt like there was some missing concept on my head, then I went back and learned like retroactively. And I finished TechSchool and I was like, whoa, hold up. I still don't know what a gen server is. I didn't have to use it. So at the end, like many of those complex topics, like even processes, I didn't do anything low level to the point of needing to write spawn or spawn link. Like I didn't do any of that. I just wanted a simple website. And I think that's actually a missed opportunity of Elixir, because I think every Elixir developer is out here talking about gen servers and parallelism and processes and some super complex topics that, to be honest, I don't think most applications needed, if you just tell me like, hey, do you want to code? Do you want to have like a Ruby on Rails but performant and modern, and you can still ship super fast? I think that's a better opportunity, a better marketing
I
opportunity
agree.
for
And
Elixir.
you
Like
can build
you
a
don't need to
lot.
know that.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can build a lot with a one-man team too with, I guess we'll call it the pedal stack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what my business partner Ben, if any of you guys will tune into Big App Energy, that's my other podcast. We kind of aim to educate non-technical people how to jump into the technical world and be like a product owner, like what to look out for developers, and it can be a shady world out there. But we talk
Mm-hmm.
about he finally saw, because I built elixirmentor.com. That's all live view. And
Mm-hmm.
at the time, hiredgunapps.com was written, I can't remember. I want to say it was Vue. I don't know. It was one of the JavaScript
Yeah.
frameworks. But he was all gun ho, like HJ is so performant, blah blah blah. And I kind of used Elixir Mentor as a learning curve for learning
Mm-hmm.
live view. And out of the box, just like my physical eyes could tell, my website loaded like 50% faster than HGA. And then he was fully on board. So we rewrote HGA in Phoenix Live View. And now like we have a whole website hosting platform that is all Phoenix Live View, and we route people's websites through Plug. And so everyone's, single page apps are all live view and they're super
Interesting.
performant and they're fast.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
people
I think
don't.
like reduce the complexity, especially
Mhm.
the operational complexity, by a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, as you mentioned, you're like proxying all the requests to a bunch of single page apps, right?
Yeah, well, essentially, like we have a lot of like shared code. So we have like components and things that we can use throughout the project. And then I'm
Mm-hmm.
using Plug as a router that just routes to project directories. And
I
we
see.
we so we have like for every website we host, we have our own app.js, we have our own CSS file, we have all these things, and then they're just up on a single Phoenix Live View app that we have
Mm-hmm.
one app to worry about on our server.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the comeback of the monolith, I guess, because some people say, yeah, you can scale with the monolith, but I think with the classic tools like Ruby on Rails, sure, you can have a monolith that scales, but you need to hide some of that complexity away using something like Heroku, for example. And Elixir just feels like a lot of doors are open to you, that you don't need to use a bunch of infrastructure. You don't need to depend on a backend as a service or a platform as a service that abstract things away from you. You can just use Elixir, use processes, scale vertically, no problem. And yeah, like it's easier to manage in general.
Yeah, I agree. All your code. I used to be against the tightly coupled like back end to front end, and I never wrapped my head. I was always like, it's better to have complete separation, right? Like
Hmm.
very compartmentalized modules essentially. Because I was like, well, what if you want to change your front end? What if you want to change your back end tech? And I never really like fully thought it through. And I think when I had Jose on, he made a very good point. He's like, if you're actually at that point where you're changing your tech and you're rewriting code, you're probably going to be rewriting everything. So it doesn't really
Yeah,
matter. Like you're over optimizing before it's even a problem. And I know that's a
yeah,
lot
I
of like,
agree.
at least that's a lot of startup problems, right? They're over optimizing before they even have to think about it too.
Yeah,
So
and we say that a lot. Like, oh yeah, let's separate the front end from the back end because we can change the front end if we need to, for example. But how often have you seen someone doing this? Like
right.
completely rewriting the front end on a different framework? I
Yeah.
haven't. And most
I
of my
haven't
experience
either.
with a separate back end and front end, and I've never done something like this in my life. So
Yeah. Well,
it feels like a
and
premature optimization.
What's really nice too is if you're building everything and you just start off with just a live view web app, right? And then you eventually want to make maybe an iOS or some native other platform, you just open up your API and sockets and you still can communicate with your app the same way, right? Like
Yeah,
like Ben and I have created some games. Some are like web-based games, some like through like game engines like Godot and other things like that. And we just open up our sockets and connect directly to our channels, and it operates the same way for the most part.
yeah. And I also think that Elixir Phoenix mostly strikes a good balance between like we have everything on one code base, so it is a monolith,
Mm-hmm.
but we have like the web folder and the other folder, which is pretty much the front end and the back end. I think it's pretty nice. And then on your live view code, you just call the context. So
Yep.
in terms of organizing the code, this feels good. So I don't know, for example, if you've seen the latest versions of Next.js, where you call your backend inside the component, like at the component level, and I don't like that. Like you have a database query inside your React component,
Mm-hmm.
and sure, it's easier to call them directly on the same file, but I don't like this balance of mixing front end and back end code too much. So I like the fact that on Elixir we have a monolith, so it is easier in terms of deploy and everything, but we still have a nice code separation. Like I'm just calling a context, and the
Mm-hmm.
context deals with the database call,
It's all
the
your CRUD
fetch call.
operations, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this way I don't like muddy the waters between front end
Mm-hmm.
and back end. No, I have a clear separation instead of having a database call inside the React component. Because, for example, if you have a login and that login logic is inside a form that is a React component, if I want to refactor the form UI, for example, I delete the form and now it doesn't work because the database call was inside my React component that I deleted.
Well,
So,
that's also bad bad project structure because
yeah, I don't like
you
it,
could
but people
essentially
seem to like
create,
it.
but you would you not create like a context file in a React app?
Yeah,
Like
here's the thing.
I would create a
Another thing.
service.
Yeah, sure. Now, you could say that, yeah, you could add your database query inside your React component, but that's not good. So you should probably just create a separate folder with your database calls inside another function,
Hmm.
which is nice. And this is another thing that I like about Elixir is that Elixir is opinionated. There's like a correct way of doing things in Phoenix as well. And on React, you can do whatever you want. So I can come here on a podcast and say, yes, of course, separate your database calls on a separate file. But then I go to work and there are DB calls everywhere because it's not enforced. There are no opinions about this. There are some blog posts saying, yes, please separate your UI from your backend logic, but it's so free. It's like a Wild West JavaScript.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want. There are no conventions, no strong recommendations for doing things one way. And on Elixir, there are strong recommendations because it's an opinionated language. And on Phoenix as well, like you, whenever you run a generator, you grab a context and you call that context inside your live view, for example. But that's it. So,
Hmm.
like from the moment you run the generators, you're like, oh, I see. That's the way that I should communicate my front end to the back end. It's opinionated. And I think,
Hmm.
especially for new developers that don't know the correct way of doing things, and when you switch teams very often, it's good to have a strong recommendation to do things instead of being a Wild West.
Yeah, I
So yeah,
agree.
sure. On React, you can move the database call outside of the component, but in reality, people are just gonna do whatever they want.
Well, and that's one of the reasons people love it, right? Love React because it's so open. You can do whatever you please,
Too
but
flexible.
it doesn't make for a good organized project structure either. Because yeah,
Yeah,
front end stuff you should be able to just, you know, delete, remove, and still be able to plug something in new and function the same way. Like you should
Yeah.
easily be able to call your context file
Mm-hmm.
and make your DB calls, because you don't want to be making queries all over your app either. You want to do it in a safe,
No.
which like using Ecto is super nice too, and makes like SQL injection a little more difficult. You have to kind of use functions a little more unknowingly for SQL injection. But if you're using Ecto in like the change set and validation, you're in a way safer position as well.
Yeah. And this is another thing that I was looking on a framework when I was feeling burned out on JavaScript. I wanted something opinionated. So that's why I went for Ruby on Rails first, because their entire marketing is we have strong opinions. Just follow our rules and you're going to have a wonderful time. So when I gave up on Rails and I started looking on other things, I was like, okay, one prerequisite that I have for the other language that I'm going to learn is I need opinions. I need strong opinions on how to do things. And preferably, I want one big framework that the entire community uses. So when I went for Elixir and I saw that everyone is using Phoenix, I was like, oh, thank God. And there are so many defaults that are baked in to Phoenix. Like we have CSRF protection, SQL injection protection. And those things, I just don't think about them on Phoenix. I just write my code and it's there. I didn't have to add any configuration. I didn't have to even think about it. Like, this is fixed. I can just write code. And I don't need to install any package for that. It's built in on Phoenix. On React, oh boy, I would have to install like 5 different packages just to get some protection, or like SQL injection protection, or maybe CSRF protection. I need like 5 packages for that. And it's built in Phoenix.
Yeah, and then that makes just the level of entry even higher for like junior level developers, because all those things you just named off, how many people that are new to develop even know what you're talking about? Because I was very naive when I first started programming, and the first time I started like really paying attention and I was like, wow, security is a thing, was I built an API and experienced a man in the middle of attack. And
really?
it was my first like eye-opening experience where, wow,
Jesus.
I have to consider who intercepts packages and what information I'm actually exposing through an API response.
Yeah.
And
so did you get into this problem like when you were beginning at programming, or like?
I would say I was probably an iOS developer for 2 years, and it was in like my first 6 months of writing like my own like Node.js API stuff. And I just didn't know. I didn't really understand.
So you were using Node.js when you got attacked?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. There's nothing built in on Node. Like,
no,
we have some extra stuff now, but there's nothing.
Right.
People, I don't know why, but they like building things from scratch.
Well,
and if you're a junior, how would you know about all these security issues? You don't.
Yep, you don't. And I feel like a lot of that stuff you learn through experience. And luckily, like my experience wasn't like, it didn't cause any financial loss or, data leaks or anything like that. It just exposed some of our content that was behind a paywall. So but it's like little learning things like that.
Super serious, but you got attacked.
It's serious. Yeah, of course. It was like the luckiest way a serious problem could have happened,
Yeah. Thank God.
Yeah. But like, it's a lot of things like that when you're new, it's almost too overwhelming to know all that stuff. And I don't think you should know it, but it's also, it is nice to be in like the Phoenix environment where, you can.
There are strong opinions.
Yeah, you can just kind of write Elixir code. You can write a web application, and you don't have to get too into the weeds to have a decently secure app.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, this was one of the factors that I was looking into before learning a new language. I was like, I need a framework to hold my hand and like show me the correct way of doing things, because I don't know Elixir, I don't know Phoenix. I want something that has strong opinions, something that just reading the docs is enough for me to write good Phoenix code or Elixir code.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's good, especially for juniors, because if you are, for example, hiring for a company that is using Phoenix, you can just say, well, read the docs. That's it. Everything you need is there. And every other company that I join that is also using Phoenix, you're going to learn the same framework, you know,
Mm-hmm.
on Node and React. Since we don't have strong opinions on how to organize the code, how to organize the folders, nothing. You have to build your own framework on every single new company that you join. So I think the going from zero to productive in JavaScript is so hard.
Yeah.
And even if you are an experienced developer, and if I switch companies, for example, I'm going to need a long time reading the entire React code base to understand how it's structured,
Yeah,
because it's different every time.
everything's gonna be different. And I've noticed that like when you inherit code, like projects can be pretty big, right? You might
Yeah.
not even read through the code base and understand everything that's going on a year into working in the project. Like
Yeah.
I've worked on just like a single app. It was like a social media music app, and between the back end and the front end, I was mostly an iOS dev at the time. I did not know everything going on the front end um, app because there was so much.
Yeah.
And I
And
and I
yeah,
feel
go ahead.
like inheriting a Phoenix project, like yes, you'll still run into that. You're going to take a long time to understand the code base, but at least everything should be organized
Yeah.
like very in a very familiar pattern, right? Everything should be the same. You should find your context files, your schemas, all of that good stuff.
Yeah,
All in the same,
exactly.
your controllers, whatever you're doing.
Yeah. And I also think that Phoenix strikes a good balance between, we have opinions, but if you want to implement your own code structure, I don't know, use a very obscure design pattern that only you know, you sort of can do that. Just write the folders on a certain way, export a module on the way that you want. So it's flexible. And if you compare that to Rails, for example, like if you want to create your own folder structure or change stuff, first of all, the auto loaders doesn't work anymore on the correct way. So you need to configure Rails to auto import some stuff from your new folders because it wasn't expecting you to create a folder this way. So it's hard. It's not so flexible. And on Elixir, it is flexible. So you have strong opinions, but you still can organize your code however you would like.
Hmm.
So yeah, this makes me comfortable.
Yeah, no, I love that. Let's see. We have a couple of questions I want to touch on. Adolfo asked if my code is open source. It is not yet, but it probably will be open source in the near future. There's some cleanup, and I it officially hit production about 2 months ago. So I have some cleanup, and but I'm really happy with it. I it's a little more manual than I want it to be right now to add organizations and domains, but I have tasks that are generating all my files and everything for every new domain we add. So there's a little cleanup, but it'll probably eventually be open source, and that would actually probably help me um, maybe correct any vulnerabilities in the project and maybe fix some performance issues. But I'm a fan of open
Nice.
source, so I believe in it, and I think it'd be a cool project actually to open source. So
Yeah, absolutely.
It probably will be in the near future. And then let's see, are there libraries in LiveView? There are a few component libraries that are popping up. I don't currently use any of them. I don't know are you familiar with any live component libraries that you like that use Tailwind
So
and
I actually have a strong take on this, which is I don't like component libraries, to be honest. even on React, everyone's like, hey, use ShadCN, use Redux, use that, use this. And I'm like, I just want the drop down. It's a select with options. And I can style like the button around. And it works. Like it's native HTML. I don't have accessibility problems by creating like a bunch of nested divs to simulate drop down. I'm using the native HTML tag.
I love that you said that because I have a very similar opinion to that. I originally, like, we have components that we use, across multiple projects, but everything is so custom per brand and per company. It isn't that hard to just write the component for the specific website that you're building. So in a lot of cases, it doesn't make sense for us to use reusable components. So yeah, we shed away from it more likely than sharing
and
code.
HTML is getting better. Like we have a popover API now. And the most common use case that I used the component libraries was to work with modals. They were like horrible to build in the past. You had to make the background dark and then move the z-index to the front to show the modal. And now we can just use the popover from HTML. And it works on all browsers.
And that's one thing you want to think.
It's better for accessibility, performance, for everything. So now I'm like, okay, I don't feel like using a component library, like never.
Yeah. I feel like component libraries are maybe a little too quickly integrated and used, right? I think there is a place for them, but I think they're overused. I think a lot of dependencies are overused. You should think about it before pulling in dependencies into your project too. If it's something you can simply write and understand.
I am traumatized by new dependencies because if you want to see a horror story on JavaScript, go to any repository that uses JavaScript, open the PRs tab, and filter for Dependabot. You're going to die immediately because there's so many dependencies. And then you filter for Dependabot, you see like 1,000 automated PRs asking to upgrade a specific dependency. So upgrade ESLint, upgrade ESLint dash TypeScript, ESLint dash prettier dash Tailwind. So much.
Well, how many critical warnings do you get when you start a fresh React project?
Yeah.
You probably start with like 50 critical warnings or higher. I don't know. It's been a while since I started a React project.
If you run npm run on like any new Next.js or Remix or any JavaScript framework, you have like 3,000 warnings. And don't even try to open the node modules. That's the scary part. So when people say, oh yeah, just use a component library, and then you need to install Redux UI /dialog, Redux UI /button, Redux UI dash, and I'm like, oh God, no, please.
Yeah.
I don't need it. I don't need it.
Well, and think about this, being the noob or the naive developer, you think all these tools are just there to help you, right?
Yeah.
But now you introduce all these security vulnerabilities or possible security vulnerabilities. I won't say it's a matter of fact, but the probability is increasing quite a bit every dependency you just go and grab without looking through the code base and knowing why you use it.
So yeah, it's definitely like a foot gun. You can hurt yourself doing this, and you have two issues. First of all, the security issue. You need to trust the author of the library that he's doing a good job. And the maintenance. You need to upgrade the version, and sometimes it breaks the existing UI. Like they change a little bit of the CSS, and then I upgrade the UI library, and now my dialogue is broken. And then I get angry because I think, Jesus Christ, if I just used the native popover API, for example, from HTML, I guarantee that it's not going to change my CSS from one day to another. It's still going to work. I don't have to deal with that dependency. I don't need to upgrade it. I don't need to test if the upgrade broke anything. So I'm not a huge fan of installing anything. Like even lately on a project, I removed vtest, which is a famous test runner for JavaScript, because now we have a built-in test runner on Node. So I just run node --test for unit tests, And there you go. So I was like, awesome. I can remove a package. And I immediately removed vtest.
Those are
So
the
yeah,
best refactors when you delete packages and delete lines of code. When you delete more than you add, right?
yeah, absolutely. So I don't like installing. I mean, if I can do the things with a relatively small effort,
Yeah,
I'm not going to install a library.
yeah,
I know many
um,
people like to call like SDKs instead of doing a fetch call to
yeah.
an HTTP service. And I'm like, just give me the endpoint. I'll do a fetch. That's it. I don't need an
I
SDK.
Yes, I would much rather work with APIs because then you're controlling the data you need and you're only requesting what you need instead of just integrating an entire SDK.
Yeah, and sometimes the SDK is tied to the runtime that you're using. So, for example, there was one time that I was using Cloudflare workers. I tried importing the AWS SDK, and that didn't work because it was expecting me to be running Node, and I'm using Cloudflare, which is
Mm.
a different runtime. So, it's so much complexity that I don't have to deal with if I just use Elixir.
Yeah, DevOps can get complicated. Like even the simplest deployment and DevOps can be hard. And that's another area where you accidentally introduce security vulnerabilities. Like just setting up, like if you set up just like an Ubuntu server or droplet on DigitalOcean, you have to worry about your security. Like, do you allow passwords or just SSH, which you should probably just do SSH so you don't just have your droplet.
Yeah.
What is it called when they just pound your password over and over? But there's a lot of things to worry about. Someone
Yeah.
asked about the Ash framework, and so I think Ash is really
I
cool.
haven't used it. I know
I
you
think it's
have.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I think there's a time and a place for it. So what's nice with Ash, like first, it's a DSL, so it's a domain specific language. It's hard for me to pick up on the syntax and write with it. Like I don't use it enough to be comfortable with it. Like I can write, you know, an ecto schema and Elixir code and my controllers and all that, like way quicker, and like a Postgres migration file. I can write all that stuff way quicker than using Ash. But I'll say that's just because I'm too new to it and haven't, really understood how to write things. But where I have integrated it is I created my Elixir Mentor blog with it. And I created that blog like a couple hours of work through like my work week. I had a blog. And what was nice is the built-in like admin dashboard. You get that stuff right out of the box, which is really nice. It's very like
Nice.
rudimentary UI. Like I wouldn't
Hmm.
give that admin dash to a client of mine. Like it's not nice enough for that, but it's nice
Hmm.
enough for behind the scenes. Like if it's your product, it's a great dashboard. It's
Nice.
also really nice for multi-tenancy. So I used Ash for multi-tenancy with my web hosting platform, and it's really nice with that because I forget what the multi-tenancy, I always forget what these are called, but when you create a new database for everyone on your multi-tenancy
Hmm.
separation, like I've done those before with Postgres scripts, and I've done it that way. And it's not hard to do that, but it took me quite a bit longer than implementing it via Ash. So I think there's like its like positives and negatives to relying completely on a framework that's like a way different syntax than just writing Elixir code. So
Yeah, because it
I don't
has
know.
its own DSL, right?
Yeah. So just be mindful. Like I think it's powerful. It's really cool. It does a lot of stuff. Um, but I don't know if I'd necessarily be too quick to pull it into a small project.
Yeah. Might be overkill, maybe.
Yeah. Well, and it's just like a different learning curve. Like an Elixir developer would probably look at all the Ash integration and they would have no clue what's going on.
Yeah, way
So
too much stuff to learn at the same time.
yeah, I don't want to bash it because I do think it's really cool. And like Zach and his team, they're building really cool stuff, and it's helped me. I think it's a really good tool to use for client work. So like hired gun apps, like if we built a web application, I would probably use Ash just because the speed that you can develop at is much quicker. So I would say it increases your efficiency a little, like quite a bit. And I think you already get that with Phoenix.
Yeah.
So you increase it even more. And so you can keep your development team much smaller and, get pretty big projects out the door pretty quick.
Yeah. I haven't
At
tried,
some
but
point,
it looks neat.
at some point when I actually think I understand what I'm doing, I'll probably do a playlist and like create some stuff. I think it'd be fun to, create a project, use Ash, create some multi-tenancy project, maybe some blog posts, use their admin dash portal. There's a lot that I could do. I just I'm not ready to teach it yet, but I think it's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. I feel like that was a sidetrack.
Are there any more questions?
Let's see. I don't know. How about Ash? No, that's about all the questions currently.
Nice.
All right, let's see. Let's talk about your TechSchool platform.
Sure.
Because I think it's a really cool concept. And did you initially start it just to learn Elixir? Was that kind of why?
I'm a project-based learner. If I want to learn a new framework or language, but I don't have a project, I'm not gonna learn it. Like I know some people that love watching a 10 hours crash course or 10 hours deep dive on a language and call it a day, say that they understood everything and they're great, but that isn't me. I need a project. So I always had this project in mind. Like I want a place to centralize all the free content because I have this YouTube channel, my YouTube channel since 2019. And I have been recording free courses since back then. Like I have a course on JavaScript, TypeScript, NPM, a small one on React. Now I'm finishing one on Elixir as well, a small crash course. And it's funny because I get like 100 views, 200 views per video. But then I get a bunch of comments thanking me for the course, saying some people said a couple of times already that my course that is free on YouTube is better than the paid one that they got. And I'm like, Jesus, this feels so unfair. We're here publishing a free content and it's not getting a good amount of views. It's hard. And then there are people out there paying for expensive courses and they don't know that the free ones exist because sometimes the YouTube algorithm is hard to master. So maybe there is like a high demand of people wanting to learn Elixir, but for some reason they can't find your channel, for example, or they can't find my channel because the algorithm is hard to master. So I was like, okay, what if I can just save all the free content on one place? And not only YouTube videos, but websites as well. So that's why I came up with TechSchool. Like I always wanted to do this, but then I combined this idea with me wanting to learn a new language and finding Elixir. And then I just combined both. I was like, okay, I'll do Elixir on this. Let's see how it goes. And yeah, I learned Elixir, Phoenix, Live View. Every single page there is a Live View page. And now we even have like a live counter on the homepage to show how many people are using the website. And we were able to do this because we are using Live View. We have WebSockets on every page, so we can count how many people are live.
Yep.
And yeah, it's funny to play around, like grab your phone, open a tab, and see the desktop version increasing. And you're like, oh my God, this works.
What
and
is
it's so easy.
It's TechSchool
.dev.
.dev.
Yes.
I want to
So
check it
it's a
out.
place where I have a bunch of JSON files where you store the data for the YouTube video or website. And then after I run a deploy, I connect to the Fly machine and I run a script to seed a SQLite database. So I just read
Okay.
the entire JSON and seed the SQLite. So then I use the SQLite to do all the queries on each page. And everyone can contribute, because if you don't know any Elixir, all you're doing is changing a JSON file. So I assume any programmer understands the JSON format, so it should be fairly easy for anyone to contribute. But for now, most of the contributions to add courses were on my side. And yeah, whenever I find a cool course on YouTube, I just change the JSON, add a new entry there, then do the deploy, seed the production database, and that's it. And the
This
cool
is great.
thing, yeah, and the cool thing of having everything on a JSON is that if you clone your project locally and run mix setup, that's it. You have a
Everything
complete
works.
replica of TechSchool locally, including the database. It's there. So if, I don't know, my server is broken and nobody can access it, you can just clone, run mix setup, and that's it. You'll have a
Nice. I
replica
love that.
locally.
No, yeah, that's
It's so
great.
simple.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, it makes seeding your database incredibly easy. I just recently, I've been trying to figure out a good way to. So I've always been a believer of, you have your development server, your staging server, and production server.
Hmm.
But like as of recently, I've had a hard time finding the need to have a development server. Like I have like my local host, so you can seed locally and do all of that, right? And
Hmm.
then I've started just connecting to, so like when you're doing local new features, I'm just connecting to a staging
Hmm.
database or staging backend instead of development. And what I
Yeah.
do every night is, so as long as, so staging, to keep it as realistic as possible, I actually wipe my staging DB every single night and
Hmm.
replace it with my backup from my production server. So
I
like
see. Yeah.
data never stays the same. It's always wiped out and replaced. So if you break something developing, I can either fix it immediately with running a script or just wait till my 3 a.m. script automatically runs and everything's fixed already. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe people will yell at me for doing that, but it's simplified my life just having staging and production.
Yeah, for sure. And on like several projects that I work, people typically they do like a dump from the database. So yeah, they have something similar for staging where they grab the latest backup and upload to staging. But on a project that I worked, they also had a script to download the staging locally. So whenever you were working on a new feature, you could just run uh, the equivalent of like mix seed, and instead
Hmm.
of using a local seed, it calls the like the Heroku or the Fly API to grab
Yeah.
the dump from staging and seed your your
I don't
local
know why
database,
I never thought about
which
that.
is complex.
Yeah,
It
well,
takes
I
some
would
setup.
always, well, like, so I use like an S3 bucket for my backups, and it's not hard to grab. So like I'm currently grabbing a database dump from production for my staging, but I've always just kept a dump file in my project for local. But it'd make
Hmm.
way more sense just to reach out to my S3 bucket and
Yeah,
then bring staging in locally. I'll have to just add that little automation instead of keeping a dump file in my project.
yeah. On a previous project of mine, I was working with Mongo, and I had two instances, the production and staging. And then locally, I just connected to staging, like directly. I didn't do
Mm-hmm.
a dump. I had
Yeah.
no Docker running, just straight connection to staging. And I think it's nice because you also have some latency. So you have like a real feeling of how
For
the
sure.
query is going to run, because locally everything's instant,
Yep.
but I was connecting straight to staging. And yeah, sure, it could mess up the staging database and then mess up the workflow of other developers, but it was just me on that project.
Yeah.
So I think it was a
Well,
nice,
yeah, what's
uh,
nice with that too, like especially like with my little web hosting, uh, all of our data then is on staging. And if you're just worrying about front end development and creating, Heeks files and HTML,
yeah,
there's really no need to have your own data.
yeah, yeah. And
So,
on TechSchool, since I have like 100% copy of what's in production, this gives me so much confidence that what I'm working on works because it's the same database, the same data.
mhm.
So yeah, I ran the test and it's like, okay, good to go. I know
Yeah.
it's going to work. It's the same database.
Yep. It's
So
so
it's
important.
really simple.
Well, that's why I think you can't get rid of staging environments ever. That's why I was like on the fence with getting rid of development, but staging needs to be an exact replica of production, like with
Yeah.
data and everything. So if something breaks when you're updating it, you never push it to production and you never have you never down your product because that's
Yeah.
the worst case scenario, right?
Yeah, sure. And
But
another thing that I tested on TechSchool was SQLite. Like I wanted a project where I could safely use SQLite and not be worried if I accidentally wipe out the database. So
mhm.
I'm not storing any user data, it's just content. And
Yep.
if I wipe out the entire database, it's coming from a JSON file. I can just reseed and that's it. So it
Yeah.
was a low risk project that I could experiment with SQLite. And especially for me, a front end developer, like I don't want to run Docker run Postgres. I just want to, I don't know, click on a file and
Yeah.
see all the data. It's so much simpler. So it was a good learning opportunity for sure.
Yeah, that's good. I've never used SQLite and but I see the benefits, especially if you don't want to deal with a bunch of Docker containers and running
That's
just
just a file.
yeah, that is nice.
And like on VS Code, you just click on top of it and you see all the data. You don't even need like a database visualizer to see or get that paid DB viewer with the elephant logo. I forgot the name.
Yeah, yeah.
For me, I just click on the file. It's so
Nice.
easy.
I'm a big fan of JetBrains data grip for like seeing like my Postgres databases and things. But SQLite is like if you're like for what you're doing, it's the perfect use case, right?
Yeah, low risk. I'm not storing any user data. If anything goes bad, I have a copy. And even if I
Yeah.
didn't use like a JSON file, I could easily set up like backups on fly, no problem.
Hmm.
But the main reason that I decided to use SQLite was because I'm not storing any user data. And I'm a front-end developer. I don't want to mess up anything on the server, anything on the database. I don't know anything about that. I'm still learning.
Yeah.
So it was low risk.
Yeah, that's a smart approach. I like that. Do you have
Yeah.
any experience? We have a question from Lewis. Have you tried anything with Bumblebee? So
It's it's
that's
machine learning, right?
yeah, it's machine learning. So I don't, and I keep saying this live that I need to dive in, but I've had both Thomas Millar and Sean Moriarty on, and those
Hmm.
guys, those are two awesome dudes, super smart in the machine
Yeah.
learning area. And Sean just released a new book, and I highly recommend checking that out. And follow those two guys on X as well because they put out a lot of awesome content.
Yeah, and I'm not a AI expert by any means, but I worked a little bit with Python, with machine learning, to to finish my degree. My final dissertation was with machine learning, and I used Python. But I haven't tried Elixir. I haven't tried Bumblebee. But I think it makes so much sense to move the AI into a functional programming world because it's all about transforming data.
Hmm.
And my Python code was like just 1,000 different variables for like pre-processing data equals Python reads file. Okay, post-processing data equals Python dot do this. And then I had like 1,000 different variables, one for each step. And then on Elixir, it's just a pipe operator. You transform the data here, 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 and get a result. It clicks on my mind. Makes sense.
Well, I think the immutability, the functional end of things, if you don't think that way, programming probably is very difficult for you to pick up. And then once you start writing, it forces you to write clean code, because I remember when I first started writing code, some functions that I created did so many things. It's like the worst practices you could ever apply. Like when a function
using
does more
global
than
variables, grabbing variables from outside the function. So
exactly.
crazy.
When a function does more than one thing, you're writing the function wrong. Like it should be very clear what that function does, and it shouldn't be doing a million different things inside. And I feel like mutability and object-oriented programming allow for those mistakes to happen like a lot more easily. For sure. And functional just makes you write cleaner code. Like it's harder to write. Don't get me wrong, you can still write bad code, but it makes it a little more difficult.
Yeah, and I think in the beginning, when I was learning Elixir for the first time, I got addicted to creating micro functions, because I was like, okay, this is an if-else. I could break this function even further down and do a pattern matching here. And then I had like 1,000 micro one-liner functions.
So you took it the wrong direction.
Yeah, I did I went way too much on the direction of refactoring until I had one-liner functions all over the code. And I was like, okay, you know what? It's fine to have an if here or a case. Yeah. I'm not going to do pattern matching on a micro function. I'm just going to call the case. And that's it. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. But you get, I don't know, I get that urge to refactor into the smallest possible function. And then I had 1,000 micro private functions and then one public. It's so good.
Yeah, there's balance to everything, right?
Yeah, I got addicted.
The ability to smell bad code is a valuable talent to acquire through years of experience as well. You can be like, something doesn't smell right about this code that I wrote, and then you know that you need to work on refactoring it.
Yeah, and I think like learning a truly functional programming language like Elixir is good either way. Like if you have plans to keep using it, it's awesome. If you don't have plans to keep using it, I still think it's worth it, because once you get bit by the functional programming virus, it's hard to go back. Like some people say that you become a better OOP programmer after learning about functional programming. And I think that's the case.
Like, I think that's true for sure.
Yeah, you learned like a new perspective. And like we keep saying, oh, pure functions, but I don't know. It feels like day to day, you never write a truly pure function until you use something like Elixir. And now, sure, you have your database calls that make the function impure, but like code-wise, it's a pure function. Mm-hmm. And once you write a truly pure function on a functional programming language, it just changed something on my mind. And then I went back to JavaScript and I was like, oh God, I accidentally mutated this array. Crap. And I don't have this on Elixir.
Right. Yeah. You only have to worry about mutating it in place, right? So you don't change it.
Yeah. There's no such thing as changing, like copying the address in memory and then mutating that address. Nope. You're just copying, transforming.
Unless you're using ETS tables improperly and gen servers improperly.
Yeah, but you need to go like really deep into those things to be able to mess up. By default, if you just read the docs and watch some courses, you can't do that.
Yeah, exactly. And no, I love that.
And that's a peace of mind, you know?
Yeah, you accidentally become a better programmer.
Yeah, and I think I sleep well knowing that I can't accidentally change something. Like now on JavaScript, I'm calling the function structured clone everywhere because I want to create a new copy of the object, a new copy of the array, mutated the new copy, and return the new copy. And I just don't have to worry about this on Elixir. Just call your functions. You grab the data structure that you want to transform as your first parameter most of the times. That's it. You get a new copy, a transformed copy. You don't have to worry about that. There is a 0% chance of you passing an array to a function and then accidentally changing another variable. It's just a peace of mind that I have on Elixir and I don't have on JavaScript.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think like the most exciting part when you first start learning Elixir is when you wrap your head around pattern matching and the pipe operator.
Yeah, pattern matching is so strong.
Yeah.
And I think it's a bit hard in the beginning because it looks a little bit like the syntax from JavaScript of destructuring. Like you return an object, and on JavaScript you can do const, curly braces, and the property that you want to extract. So I was thinking this way, and in some way it is true. You're trying to extract a value, a pattern from something, but it's not the same. So for me, it took a while, but after that, after I learned the basics, I got addicted to it.
Yeah, when I first started seeing it, I was like, what is this black magic? I have no idea what all this means. What's happening here? And then when you finally understand that, like you can pattern match a map to anything, like to variables, just like right there as a parameter in your function. It's pretty amazing.
Got scared the other day. I found out that you can pattern match on strings. Like I was checking, I think the icon component from Phoenix that uses hero icons from Tailwind. And like they do some weird pattern matching to check if you're using a class name that starts with icon dash. And I was like, oh my God, you can pattern match on strings. Because I didn't know that. I just knew you could do that on structs, lists, but strings, even strings, you can extract the beginning of the string to check if it contains icon dash. And it's impressive.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's really cool. I love it.
It's limitless.
I mean, I love Elixir so much. I had to create my own job to write Elixir because it's just what I had to do.
Yeah, we can just keep recording tutorials and content to try to increase the adoption.
Yeah.
Which is like the only thing that I don't really like about Elixir, unfortunately, is the low adoption. But that's it. Like I have nothing else to complain, to be honest. Oh, and I forgot to mention, but one of the reasons that made me stop using Rails, for example, was the lack of types. And I got scared because Elixir doesn't have types. And I was like, oh boy, this is not going to end well. But I'm going to try it anyways. And I realized using Elixir that actually what I wanted from types was mostly the autocomplete and IntelliSense. And I get that by simply installing, I forgot the name of the language server. I think it's Elixir LS, the one that I'm using.
Yeah, I think that's the most popular.
Yeah, and it works perfectly for me. I just start typing the module name. It autocompletes with all the functions that are inside. And with pattern matching and guards, you sort of know what the type is that you're dealing with.
I love
and you check that at runtime. Like this is not just a linter. It checks at runtime. Because, for example, if on TypeScript I say, this is a string, and then I call an API, I mean, that API could return a number, but the code doesn't know that because I'm not checking. I'm just saying it is a string. So at runtime, I'm not checking anything because TypeScript is just a linter. Unless I explicitly code like if type of field equals number, then okay, I'm checking at runtime. But TypeScript is just a linter. And on Elixir, sure, I don't have the full linting that TypeScript gives me, but I sort of know the type.
I really like the approach. I like the approach that Jose and the Elixir team is taking to with types, where it's just like, warnings at compile time or build time. And it's like less intrusive. So it still allows you to do whatever you're doing. And you just, have your warnings sprinkle up, which I find beneficial. I really like that. And I used to be all about types. Like I preferred
Yeah, me
TypeScript.
too.
TypeScript was always in my projects instead of JavaScript.
Hmm.
And um, I've gotten less, I feel less of the need to have a strong type system.
Yeah, Elixir made me change my mind because I
Same,
thought
same.
I really enjoyed TypeScript, and I do. But when people say, just give Elixir a chance, just try it, and you're going to understand us, just try it.
Hmm.
If you're watching this and you're a TypeScript fanboy, just try it.
Just try it.
Try to
Do it.
yeah, just try it. Try the guards and the pattern matching and download the language server. Could be any of those three available. And you're going to see that what I get with TypeScript, I am almost getting with Elixir. And for me, it's
Hmm.
good enough.
Yeah. No, I agree. It took me 3 years to try it. I had a buddy telling me, check out Elixir, check out Elixir, check out Elixir. I was like, dude, I don't have time for
Yeah,
that.
like it feels like from the Stack Overflow survey, like the 2% of developers that use Elixir don't want to stop. They
Hmm.
just give me more Elixir, please. I don't want to go
Yep.
back. Just more Elixir, please. I don't want to go back to my old language. The
That's why
happiness levels are increasing every year.
that's why I try to build all my clients new products in Elixir. I'm just trying to contribute to the
You're planting the
community.
seed of Elixir, and then if
Well,
they need more assistance, they're gonna need to hire Elixir developers.
exactly. So if their product grows, then they're going to be hiring Elixir developers. So
Nice.
that's
And
all we
if
can
the
do.
product grows, they're not gonna have a problem getting a bigger server. Should be easy to
Exactly.
scale.
Well, yeah. Well, the second you have to start scaling Node.js stuff, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, scaling node is tough.
And
And
I'm a monolith fan over microservices as well.
yeah,
And
me too.
I know the arguments can go on all day long, but I personally think microservices are more complicated than a monolith system, especially for a small team. And a lot
Yeah,
of people will disagree with me, like it's easier to do this, this, and this. Like, yeah, when you're on the free tier of everything that they suck you into, sure. But then you're
yeah,
locked in tight. It's dangerous. And then when your product actually starts to scale, your server costs can skyrocket
yeah,
and you have
yeah,
no
absolutely.
control over what you use.
Yeah, and even like with the division between front end and back end, that's two services. And in my
Hmm.
opinion, that's already too much. Like,
Yeah.
I wish I could just change the database call to get what I want. Just one line change, that would be nice. But
Hmm.
then now I need to call someone from the back end and say, hey, could you please include this new field on the response? And then they need to finish first. So they add the field and then I can proceed. So they sort of block me before I can
Yeah.
keep working. So two services is already
Yeah.
complicated enough, in my opinion. Now
Well,
imagine 10 or 20. That's crazy.
yeah. And
Imagine
depending,
coordinating all this work on a small team. It makes no sense.
well, yeah. And just like depending on how you even organize your project, you might have to wait a sprint or two just to get that in your request or, in your
Yeah.
response for that request. So I don't know. I agree with you.
Yeah. Maybe it makes sense for like a company that has 5,000 employees, then
Hmm.
sure. That
Yeah.
probably makes sense because having a monolith where 1,000 developers are all working on the same time, I'm not sure that's good.
Yeah. It could be a
So
problem.
for insanely big teams, sure, makes sense because
Right.
you're responsible for one small piece of the application and that's it.
Yeah.
But for most of the teams, it makes no sense. I want a monolith. That's it. And with Elixir, I can scale easily. I have a nice separation between the front end and back end code. I have Phoenix live view on the front end. So you don't need to reach for React or Next.js to have a good user experience. You can just use live view. And on my opinion, as a front end developer, most of the good side of React comes from the fact that we're not doing a full page reload. That's it. So if you
Hmm.
have like a bunch of static pages and you're using live view on all of them, you're not doing a full page refresh. and that's it. Like you have a much better user experience. You just
Yeah.
added live view to them, and it's great. You don't need a single page application. You don't need React. You don't need Next.js. If you can just not refresh the page, that's it.
Yeah.
That's what I want. I don't need anything complex. Most of the time, the UI that I build are super simple, to be honest. I don't even need a component library or anything. So if you just make the page not refresh on navigation, that's it.
Yeah.
And you
Well,
can easily
and
do that on live view. Just
yep.
convert to live view.
Yeah, exactly. And you pretty much get amazing SEO performance out of the box
Yeah.
with any server side rendering, but live view makes it really easy and not complicated at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, to me, what I learned from this entire journey is that Elixir plus Phoenix is the best cost benefit that we have for web development in all areas. When I started building TechSchool, now I have less dependencies. I have an easier time working on the front end and back end. I am more productive. I don't have to worry about scaling. I can easily scale an Elixir server. So yeah, the cost benefit, it's unbeatable in terms
Yeah.
of having a low amount of dependencies. I am very productive learning Elixir. And I don't know any of those complex topics about Phoenix or Elixir. I don't know anything about
Yeah.
gen servers. And
Well,
if I had a complex use case, I just need to learn it instead of
yeah.
installing like Redis or something else, adding another piece of infrastructure to my existing web app. I can just use native features from Erlang and Elixir
Yeah.
instead of adding more infrastructure to the problem.
Yeah, you guys don't need
So
Redis. Just think about like using a nets table or a gen server or something. You can use anything else than introducing an extra component of complication, just an extra layer of complication, really.
yeah, so it just simplified everything. That's the moral of the story for me.
Yeah.
Everything is simpler. The backend is simpler, infrastructure is simpler, front end is simpler, the code looks cleaner, easier to test, faster to run. I'm using all the resources on my MacBook Pro. I'm gonna use all the resources on the server that I'm deploying, the Elixir application. So overall, less complexity, which is
Yeah.
exactly what I was looking for when I got burned out by JavaScript.
I love that. So, all right, you're a JavaScript developer. What are your recommendations for other JavaScript developers? Where do you get started when you want to learn Elixir?
So I actually don't have a good tip because usually when people ask me, oh, where should I learn, I don't know, Next.js or a new language, a new framework, I'm always like, just read the docs.
Mm-hmm.
And they get angry because they are like, oh, I was expecting a course and you told me to read the docs. So my recommendation is always to start watching free tutorials on YouTube plus the docs. And if you have a hard time learning only with these two resources, then you can reach for a paid course. I know you have a paid course on Elixir, so guys, go buy Elixir Mentor's Elixir course. But I think your free course is like good enough to start and get your hands dirty with the
Yeah.
code. And if I need something more complex, I typically just go to the docs, which are amazing, by the way. And it's all centralized on the same Hex doc. I think it's the
Yep.
name.
Yeah, the
So
docs
you don't
are
need to
quite
learn.
amazing.
Yeah, like you learn how to use the interface of one documentation, and it's all the same for
Yep.
all packages. So it's so much easier. The documentation from Elixir is amazing. From
Yeah,
Phoenix
I
as well,
agree.
it's amazing. Just follow the steps on the docs, and you should be good to go.
Yeah, and like I know a lot of people don't like documentation or they can't learn that way, but you need to at least put the effort of trying because you won't get out of that like junior gap until you can learn from documentation. So yeah, you have to
And
kind of
it's part
force
of the
yourself.
learning. Like you
Yep.
need to learn how to deal with problems without having like a senior by your side. You
Yeah,
need to learn
exactly.
how to handle yourself alone, just reading the docs. And ChatGPT is good at generating Elixir code as well. Like multiple times I asked how to refactor this if else into a case.
Yeah.
And the response was really good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think asking deep questions on ChatGPT, reading the docs, and watching the free content on YouTube, it's a pretty good starting point.
Yeah.
And if you still feel like you need like someone to hold your hand and show you a straight path to being productive with Elixir, then you should consider buying a paid course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
But
agree.
for me, just reading the docs was enough. And watching your course, your free course on YouTube.
Well, I mean, like docs are great. That's how I learned. And then my playlists, like I have a good basic one that just goes through like data types and like real basic scenarios. And then like a little API where we create like an authorization endpoint manually. And then my Phoenix Live View course where, you know, I was not a front end dev and I just started teaching that. So I was kind of learning Live View as I taught it. But
and it's impressive, right? That a backend developer didn't have a hard time learning the front end. And you're building like React levels of user experience with Live View. And you're basically a backend developer that learned quickly Live View, which is very nice.
Yeah, and like
you can quickly jump between the two worlds without much trouble.
Yeah, and like before that, like what I would do for front end development would be like admin portals where I would grab a component library or a dashboard.
Yeah.
And that is as much that's as much front end work as I would do. And so yeah, Phoenix Live View is super easy to pick up. And
I think if you're coming from React, the mental model is very similar. We just use functions, no classes or inheritance or anything complex, and you handle interactions similarly to React. Now, instead of having an on submit on React, you have a handle event, a handle load more, for example, on the backend. But the mental model is the same, in my opinion.
And I would say like my course is really good, the one that I sell, but at the same time, if you're just kind of learning it as a hobby and don't have the money to pay for it, you can learn everything that I teach in that through free resources.
Yeah.
Like the only thing that is like not really covered in my YouTube channel, scattered among all my videos, is like OTP stuff, gen server stuff. And I'm aiming to finish because it's like still a pre-release course and I've just procrastinated all summer long, but I'm aiming to finish the course the middle of September. And the only like I'm building an analytics API. So it'll be very similar to Plausible minus the front end, but like how you would retrieve analytics through like an API and all of that stuff. So like there are going to be good little snippets that you learn, but at the same time, all the free resources are available and you can still learn everything. And like what you said, you're a project-based learner. So am I. Like I didn't learn Elixir until I had a project. And it was actually like a company that I started, I built it in Elixir, and that's how I learned Elixir. So
yeah, I think learning by demand is pretty good because, for example, if I had started learning Phoenix without trying to build TechSchool, I just wouldn't truly absorb the information. Like to get an information to truly get inside my head, I need to use it, or at least know when I should use it. If I studied something and I don't know where I'm gonna use it, to me it's useless.
Yeah, I agree.
And if I think it's useless, I'm not gonna learn it. It's as simple as that.
Well, and just coding along with someone on a project that you are not planning and developing, you have a lot slower learning pace. Like if you have a project you want to build, like for example, I'm not saying don't follow my like just clone, right? But if you have another like real time or anything similar web app idea that you want to build, watch my videos, apply what you learn there to your project. And that is the best way to learn.
Yeah, like as an example, I did a coding bootcamp many years ago, and I didn't do any of the exercises that the teachers told me to do. And then when I was talking to other people, they were asking, why the hell didn't you do the exercises? You're supposed to do the exercises. And I was like, hey, I want to build my own website. So what I'm doing is watching the course. And once I learn something that is useful for me, I keep building my website. So why would I do an exercise if I can just use the same knowledge for my own gains, like for my own personal website? So this is usually what I do. I just watch the course. Usually the person is building something. And yeah, sometimes I follow along, sometimes I don't. But usually I'm watching and building my own thing on the side, which works for me.
Yeah, you learn and build as you go, and then you
Yeah.
apply knowledge you instantly learn, and it makes you grasp it and remember it better too.
Yeah. And on my mind, it's not a useless exercise. It's my own website. So I
Yeah.
want to learn it because I need it for my own website. So I am much more curious and interested in the topic if I'm building something for me.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. We have Lewis on here. He said, try to clone an existing project of yours, which you created in another language, and the conversion to it. Yeah, that's a great path too. Convert an existing project. Learning by doing is really important. This is Wasim. For Phoenix's case, though, I had to read official guides to understand why things are structured the way they are. I mean, that's normal. Whenever you enter like a new framework, you're going to have to read the docs to understand why things are structured the way they are. So I think that like you still learn by doing with also checking out guides and documentation.
Yeah, I think that this is actually a problem that comes from JavaScript. There are so many people using the language, so many free courses out there that many people, they become developers or they learn a new language or a new framework like Next.js or Remix without touching the docs. They just watch the course and that's it. Because there's so many Next.js courses that technically you don't even need to read the docs. So once, for example, I go here on a podcast and I say, yeah, just read the docs. Some people get frustrated. They're like, okay, I know I can read the docs, but I wish I had like a big 10 hours course on Phoenix that I could just watch and learn by that. And it's something that I'm planning to do in the future as well. Like I want to translate all those famous Next.js courses to Elixir and Phoenix. So, Slack clone using Next.js. I'm going to use Phoenix or Phoenix and Next.js. Maybe Phoenix for the backend and Next.js for the front end. And Discord clone or Netflix clone using Next.js, using Remix. I miss having that on Elixir as well. But I think it's a matter of time before more people start publishing more courses on Phoenix. But the docs are amazing. Okay, the docs are enough.
The docs are enough, and I agree with that. Well, I think the problem, we have a funny comment. Nero goes, in Linux we have a mantra, RTFM. And so, yeah, read
I kind of agree,
manual, right?
But I don't want to be rude.
Yeah, read the effing manual. I think like I fell guilty of this when I first started learning JavaScript too. You lack the ability to learn on your own if you always need a course. So until you can read documentation and problem solve on your own, you're gonna have trouble breaking out of junior developer status. Because I don't think
this mindset of depending
you don't
on just video form of content.
Right. Like I don't think a senior developer, that doesn't mean you know how to do everything. It means you have the ability to do everything. You have the ability to learn and solve problems, read documentation and solve things without an exact guide for how to do it.
Yeah. And I think nowadays the docs are pretty good.
Yeah. For the most part, a lot of things, documentation is great.
If you go, for example, even to the Ruby on Rails docs, which in my opinion were very ugly and looked old, pretty old. If you go to the new docs, they're amazing. They look great. They're very intuitive. So I think we all created that a monster on our heads that, oh no, please don't tell me to read the docs. They're ugly. They make no sense. Nobody reads those. And no, actually people really read the docs and they're pretty good now. If you go to Next.js, for example, there is a Learn tab, which is a free course, basically. So you don't need to go to the docs, you go to the learn tab, and I see many other frameworks doing the same. They have the docs and the learn. So it's a competitive advantage for a framework to have a very good documentation. And I think that the Elixir and Phoenix documentation are amazing.
Yeah.
So
Well, the ability to start a new project, like their getting started guides are amazing. Like
yeah,
you can,
and to learn Phoenix, I just read the order that is recommended on the Phoenix guides. I think it's the middle section, like learn about plug, then learn about controllers, then learn about this and this. I just followed the order, and it
yeah.
was great.
Yeah, no, I love that. I've been doing a fun little live stream series where I'm just reading getting started guides, and I'm
And
working
this is
my way
great
through.
because it's
Yeah,
like reading with a senior on your side. So if you
yeah,
want to learn by reading the docs, but I don't know, maybe the functional language is a bit foreign to you, then just watch your video where
yeah.
you're reading the docs and explaining further.
Well, yeah, and and I'm a big believer. Like I hit things where I stumble and might not be familiar with things, and like that's very normal. Like everything's not going to be perfect. Like I've had people ask me, like, "How are you so okay with looking like an idiot?" I was like, "I don't feel like I look like an idiot. I just don't know one particular thing."
Yeah.
And then you figure it out, you know. And
I
maybe
think
I'm an
it's part
idiot.
of the
It's okay.
process of being a
Yeah,
YouTuber, like getting comfortable, not being a master or a senior
right.
on a
Like,
topic.
yeah, I make mistakes. I'll misspeak. And if someone makes a valid point, I'm like, that's a valid point. I never thought about it that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, some
But
people fix what I said on a video, and I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. So I pin the comment and say,
yeah,
hey guys, sorry, I messed up this thing. The correct way is this way.
yeah,
That's it.
exactly. Yeah,
Nobody got hurt, and it's all right. Like it's
yeah,
part of the process.
yeah. The only thing that sometimes bothers me is when they're like, well, why didn't you solve it this way? I just want to be like, dude, there's a million ways to skin a cat. Like,
Yeah, yeah, but
like,
those comments they bother me as well. Like, oh, you could have replaced your entire code into this two-liner, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I look very stupid here, like very stupid. But then it's the same process for me. I just pin the comment or add a comment of mine saying, hey, I did it this way, but you could do it this other way. Like both work, but
yeah,
this other way that this person commented is more performant or
yeah.
better for readability. And I have no shame in admitting my mistakes because everyone
Yeah.
is
Well,
wrong
it's
sometimes.
it's important too. Like a lot of my tutorials that I'm putting online, like no one's reviewed my code before I record, right? So it just kind of goes through the process. Like, look, when you work on a team, these changes would be PR'd and they'd be discussed, or they'd be entered, right? And then maybe you'd refactor down the road. Because like code is just like it's a living thing. So you're gonna
Yeah.
if you made something that was, 20 lines of code that could be 2 lines, that's a good performance refactor in the future too. Like not
Yeah.
everything's originally caught. You want to like get functionality out of it and then you make it more performant.
Yeah. And one thing that I've seen in the past, which I thought was pretty cool, was one guy, he recorded an entire course on Node.js. It was pretty big. And the final code, he open sourced it, of course. And he got a bunch of PRs of random people asking to add a new dependency or to fix this or that. And then he recorded extra videos after the course saying, hey, I'm going to merge this PR. And I think it's nice because of this, this, and that. And it's going to improve this function, this class, and I'm going to merge it. And
I
I think on
love
one
that.
video, he also interviewed the person that opened the PR. And he asked him to explain his reasoning behind his PR. And it was pretty
Ooh,
neat, like
I
seeing
like that.
a true senior, like admitting to his
Yeah.
mistakes and
Yeah. No,
improving
well,
the code.
I think it's silly if everyone sits here and pretends that they don't ever make mistakes. But I
Yeah,
really like that idea. If I ever get a
it was
PR,
pretty cool.
yeah, if I ever get a PR on like my JIS clone or one of my projects, I really like the idea of going like not back, but just make a video about it. I think that's a good
Yeah.
idea.
It's like a follow-up video.
Yeah, I
And
love
I
that.
think it was pretty good because you see the perspective of two developers. Like you see like 10 hours of content from the same person, So you know how he thinks, how he codes, but then you have some follow-up videos with PRs from random people, and you're like, oh yeah, actually, this code is better.
How
And
often
then he
though?
explains why. It's pretty nice.
Yeah. How often have you sat there, struggled, and couldn't figure out something, and then just asking the opinion of another developer, just in asking the question, you solve it? Like you're like, oh, you know what? I can do this. And it's the simplest fix ever.
Yeah, it's why we do pair programming. Like
Exactly.
sometimes you're just stuck and a fresh pair of eyes on the same problems, like, oh, just do this. And you're like, oh my God, you're right. Jesus. And it's like a very nice moment. So yeah, I liked the idea of adding this to a course, like follow-up videos.
Yeah,
not
I love that.
Fixing, but like improving the code.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I love that. That's awesome. All right. Well, we have gone on for over an hour and a half, so I think we can wrap this up. It was awesome. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me. If anyone has any last...
Thanks for having me. It was a huge honor. Like I learned Elixir with the docs and you. Like your Elixir, That's awesome. I think it's getting started in Elixir. What's the name? Elixir Getting Started. You can link this on the comments later, but it's pretty good. So if you watch that course, it's more than enough to learn.
I have the Getting Started guide, my Phoenix Live View, and then Elixir Basics.
Yeah, it's Elixir Basics. This one.
Yeah.
I even downloaded it on my phone. So I watched it like on a plane travel one day. It was pretty neat. So thanks for having me. It was like a huge honor to be here with my teacher, basically.
I appreciate that. And it's awesome to have you here. Another JavaScript developer who has seen the light.
Trying to spread the world of Elixir, showing that there is a better way of developing software.
Now, guys, I don't know if you know, but Daniel, he's a more popular guy than me. So he's a cool guy. And if you don't follow his YouTube channel or him on X or any of those, I think I have the links in the description. And definitely check out his content because he makes really great stuff.
Yeah, you just need to do more rant style videos and you'll get more subscribers.
Rant style?
Yeah.
I like to stay out of the tech drama, but it could maybe be fun. I don't know.
It's a dangerous territory. That's all.
It's just like, I don't know what I want to consume my attention because like if you get enough like angry comments, I don't want to be like, oh,
yeah,
I can't
it's not
wait.
Worth it. Not worth it.
I can't wait to jump on this guy. No.
Yeah, no. But you're on the right path, and keep posting the quality content. It's amazing. I learned a lot from you.
Well, thanks for being here. If you ever want to come back on, just reach out. It's been a fun chat. All right, and thank you everyone. Much. Thank you everyone that has tuned in, and I hope everyone has a good weekend. We'll see you in the next live stream. Testing.